Welcome to Night Light. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Night Light, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. So glad you could join us. It's going to be a really, really cool show today. I have Bob Frissell with me, and he's written a book called Catching the Ascension Wave, Everything You Need to Know About the Coming Great Awakening, the Sacred Planet. Right now, the Galactic Super Wave, is dramatically raising the vibratory rate of our planet and everyone on it. As Bob explains, in order to catch this wave of ascension and survive and thrive during the coming Great Awakening, we must undergo a personal transformation to raise our vibration and align with the higher self within each of us. He explores the forces working to advance our planetary ascent to higher consciousness, as well as those seeking to block it. He looks at the role of the ancient builder race from Venus and other ET races, such as the Greys and the Draco Reptilians, in our evolutionary development and technological advancements. And he exposes startling details of our secret space program, the New World Order, and the Depopulation Agenda, as well as explaining how the precession of the equinoxes is directly influencing Earth's awakening, and how the dance between the forces of darkness and light actually allows consciousness to evolve. He shares information on meditations, tools, and techniques to transmute the energies blocking access to your higher self, and reveals how the infusion of higher dimensional energy is impacting planet Earth and each of us. Unveiling the incoming new energetic configurations for the Earth, he details how the Great Awakening is nothing less than the birth of a new humanity, and how, by raising your vibration, you can help in the co-creation of heaven on Earth. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Well, Barbara, hi. I mean, that's quite an act to follow. Did I actually write a book like that? Wow.
If you didn't, you really should.
Yeah, well, I guess I did. I guess I did. It, what I want to say about that is that I've been actively seeking and searching, really, probably for all of my life. But I mean, on a very deep level, 1990 would be a good place to start, where I thought, I was doing pretty good. I was a teacher of breath work and doing pretty good with all of that, and thought that I had a pretty good understanding of life and why we're here and what it's all about, and the rest of that. And the universe tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Not so fast, buddy. There's a few more things that you just need to be aware of." And so I said, "Yeah, okay." Now, at the time, I had absolutely no idea what it was that I needed to be aware of. This just came to me intuitively, in the form of just yeah, intuitive messages would be a good place to would be a good way to say it. So I had no idea what it might be, what the exact message might be, but I realized it didn't matter because I knew that I had the entrance requirement, and that was the absolute burning desire to find out. I mean, I was just thrilled, to, oh boy, there's more out there that I need to know about. I wonder what it could be. And so, I just went about living my life knowing full well that it would be revealed to me. And, of course, that is exactly what happened. And, of course, how it initially came to me is in a way that I never, ever would have suspected. And that's what, that's what, has just made it, and it continues to be just an exciting adventure. So, what I want to say is just thanks so much for having me on. I get to spend 2 hours hanging out with you talking about stuff that, look, I'd be talking about this anyway. I'd be researching it anyway, whether I was writing about it or not. And I just get the best of both worlds. So here we are. Let's go. Let's do it.
Oh, yeah. I know what happened to you happened to me in the 70s. I call it my 2x4 moment. When the universe says, "Hey, you've got a job to do. Get off your duff and get going because there's a lot of stuff you need to do." And I was hit with an amazing car accident that took me out of a career of teaching and put me into this field full time. But you had a much more severe takedown, so to speak, with your back.
Yeah, I did. Well, I guess everything is all relative. But so you got whacked over the head by a 2x4. I got hit over the head with a sledgehammer.
You did, yeah.
And this goes way back in the day. I guess we both go back, into what you would be considered previous lifetimes for us too, really.
I'm sure.
I go back to 1976, when I came home from a baseball game and saw a dime on the floor, so I reached down to pick it up, and that was the last thing I did for quite some time because I just fell to the floor completely paralyzed, in unbelievable pain. I couldn't move. I couldn't. Yeah, I not even thinking about it, but it was clearly the worst thing that ever happened to me at the time, without a question. But the transformation is such that I now and since for a long time have realized that that's exactly what needed to happen. That in fact it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I needed to get hit over the head with a sledgehammer in order to wake up. And waking up for me meant starting from square one and realizing that since I'm not going to let a doctor do surgery on me, I heard too many horror stories there, and that chiropractors, even though I bless them, they helped me tremendously at the beginning, diminishing returns started to set in, and I began to realize, well, there's only one option left, and that's I have to learn how to heal myself. Now, you talk about starting from asleep and unconscious. Goodness sakes, I was definitely there and then some, so I had to start from square one and just find a way. And thank goodness the burning desire saw me through. It took a long time, but out of that long time, I developed something that not only worked for me, but I'm so grateful to say that it's helped dramatically many hundreds, if not thousands, of other people too. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I was told I was going to die. I was told I was going to die by the doctors, and my response to them was, I don't have time to die.
Good for you.
And it was, I look back on it and I think, where was I, coming from at that point in time? And it was basically, whatever this is has got to be healed and go away because I have work to do. So, I can relate to what you did. And I think everybody today is feeling the energy, is feeling that there's a shift, there's a change, something's going on. Their sleep patterns are changing, or there's just so much going on that they are at a loss. And I think what, you talk about a great awakening. Is this great awakening that's coming, is it a cyclic great awakening, or is it a one-shot deal great awakening?
Well, I'm glad we got 2 hours. so we got some time to unpack this. Yeah. Goodness sakes, where do you begin here? What I'm talking about ultimately is nothing less than the shift from into a much higher wavelength aspect of life, and to pick a starting point. What I guess I'd like to say about that is that there's oh goodness sakes, the universe is so vast we can hardly begin to contemplate it. Yet at the same time, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's also, you can also go down to the minutest details because it's holographic. But with that said, looking at the bigger picture in terms of what's going on out there and all that, there's many different ways of interpreting this one reality. There's only one spirit moving through all life, the one infinite creator, if you will. Yet there's many ways of interpreting that one reality, that one spirit that moves through all of life, and all of it is a function of consciousness, and that's a function of how high or how low your vibratory rate is. And so what that leads us to is the realization that there's many different, what I'm going to call dimensional worlds here. I also use the term density and dimensions. I use those terms interchangeably. But no matter what you call it, what is a dimensional world? Well, what it is a wavelength universe. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, you got to think of it in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And Tesla was a pretty sharp guy, to say the least, even though he was, severely ostracized and wasn't allowed to do his work. He wanted to give us free energy way back in the early 20th century, and he went to J.P. Morgan and said, look what I got. And J.P. Morgan says, well, I'll let you know. And of course, they're still holding on to that one because free energy would open up, it would open up a total can of worms. But we can perhaps get into that a little bit later. Energy, frequency, and vibration. The different dimensional worlds are different wavelength universes. And as you go up the dimensions, what you come to is a higher vibratory world, much shorter wavelength, and higher vibratory world means that as you raise your vibratory rate, you are now becoming in harmony with all of life everywhere. And you move out of the separate state where you don't connect the dots and you don't see wholeness and you think that you're just a lonely entity just wondering what you're doing here, what life is about and all of that, to the full realization that literally there's nobody else out there. There's really just one consciousness. It just all began with a thought, and you can call it the infinite creator, whatever you will, but the holographic nature of reality suggests that let me put it this way. If you take a hologram and cut it, let's say, into 4 equal pieces, and then you shine a laser through each of those 4 equal pieces, what you're going to get is a smaller version of the whole. And so the whole is contained, you can cut it into 1,000 pieces if you want, and you're still going to get a smaller version of the whole when you shine a laser through each one. So I very carefully in my books unpack the reality as such that we do live in a holographic universe. And that means you can go in forever, you can go out forever, no matter which way you go, what you're going to get is either a smaller version or a more complete or a larger version of the whole, of the oneness that exists. Now, in the higher dimensional worlds, in the higher vibratory worlds, there's no question at all, because the beings at that level are heart-based and they're living they're living in the present moment directly through their connection to Source, their higher self. It's functioning fully, accurately, and perfectly. But as you go down into the dimensional worlds, and we live on a planet that for a long time has been in the third dimension, which is a fairly dense place, you tend to miss that. In fact, for the most part, we've missed it almost completely. There are a few living souls who have, come to the higher reality, higher realization of the truth of things. But for the most part, most people have missed that. And when you miss that, you are living life conceptually. You're not living it as a presence. You're living life out of your reactive mind, which does not see the present moment, which does not connect the dots and see wholeness. It sees separation. And so that I am proposing is the shift that we are very much in process of making. And I'm talking about nothing less than a shift in dimensional realities, from the relative density of the third dimension into the much higher vibratory world, much shorter wavelength world of the fourth dimension. And I'm saying that, well, it's not me. I'm just drawing on information that is available in at least, I found at least 35 different references to it all over the planet, that they're all talking about the same thing. And that is that, well, here again, I'm glad we got 2 hours, Barbara, because we're going to need some time to really continue to unpack this. I don't want to just throw everything out right now. Although I can, and then just come back to, this is, we need to break this down a little bit. But maybe I've said enough to just, at least strike people's interests. I hope so.
Well, I'm sure you have. I mean, when you talk about living in a hologram, that's information that has definitely been out there in a lot of different places, and it's hard for people who can, touch themselves and everything feels solid, understanding that a hologram can be very solid, and that there is that there are other dimensions, levels, frequencies above where we are currently living that are in many ways mirror images of where we are now, but with a different philosophical look, focus on life. It's not how many toys can you gather. It's being a community. It's we are called a family of man, should be and woman, but we're a family of man. Called that intentionally because we are all one family, and I think there is a striving to get back to that concept, so that joy and peace and love is far more abundant than it is today.
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah, and and I would submit that that's what's happening. You, in your intro, suggested that, as I have said in my book, that there's this great galactic super wave that's coming in. And to be clear, I spend a lot of time in the book really unpacking that, really getting into it, going back to what other cultures have said about these types of things, and going back to what was communicated back in the 1950s through contact with various ET races, and they're all saying the same thing. Just for example, there's references to Ascension. And that is moving from one-dimensional reality into this much higher vibratory universe called fourth dimension or fourth density. But there's references to this in at least 35 different civilizations, as you call it, into their religious myths or whatever. But, the prophecies of Jesus, for example, it's consistent with at least 34 other cultures. You can find this in the Quran, in the Old Testament, and I had some passages from the Bible in the book that really spell out the nature of Ascension. Native American spiritual tradition, goodness sakes, yeah, you're going to find it there for sure. Celtics and the Druids have it. Hindu scriptures have it. They call it the Samvarta fire at the end of the age, and so they're all talking about the same thing. They're all talking about Ascension. And it's not something that just happens haphazardly. It happens when you come to the end of certain cosmic cycles. And guess what? We're at the end of one of these cosmic cycles right now. And what it's doing is creating a great displacement process, which I will explain in great detail, which I think would be very useful.
Oh, absolutely. Because, and this does correspond a lot to the progression of the equinoxes, too. And
yeah, well, that's one of the cycles, yeah.
Yeah. And so that and we have the yugas, and we have the different root races. I mean, it's all throughout history, as far back as it's recorded, and then some, that these cycles happen. And as far as the dimensions go, I truly believe that there are portals all over this planet that are interdimensional, so that those from higher realms come and go. And so that I would think is part of what the ancient builder race that you're talking about prior to the flood. Prior to the flood, those ancient builders still do visit the planet. And
that all happened beginning about 2.6 billion years ago. So we got to go way back to talk about them. But you've got to talk about the ancient builder race in order to get really a clear understanding, a big picture understanding, I would say, of just what this is and what it's all about. So how do we find out about the ancient builder race? Well, thankfully, it's well known in the secret space program. And I just opened another can of worms there, didn't I? But
I want to go there too, for sure.
Yeah, sure. Well, okay. Just to give a brief overlay of that for just a moment, there's the technology that we see that's available to us. And then there's the real stuff. And so speaking of space travel, NASA has been trotting out their tin can technology, relatively speaking, for quite some time, and trying to convince us that we went to the moon multiple times through the Apollo program. And maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I happen to be a naysayer on that one, because in order to get through the Van Allen radiation belt, which is 25,000 miles thick, which begins 1,000 miles above the Earth, but you can't even approach it with the current technology that NASA's putting up there. One of the satellite space stations got about 400 miles up, and the crew members couldn't stand it. They were getting 600 miles away, but still too close to this radiation belt, the Van Allen belt. Yet we're expected to believe that the Apollo program, in order to make it through, their capsule needed to be insulated with a minimum of 6 feet of lead casing. And if that was the case, they never would have got off the ground. Yet we're being led to believe that we made it to the moon through the Apollo program. Well, I would come back and say, yeah, we've been to the moon many thousands of times, but I don't think it was through Apollo. So that leads us to the real technology that has been buried in the what we call the secret space program. And in the secret space program, oh goodness sakes! I mean, we're we've got a lot of areas to go into here. In the secrets, let's just. Can we come back to the secret space program? We can. I can either take a deep dive into it and then talk about the ancient builder race, or let's just go into the secret space program. What the heck?
Okay,
I think a real good
one thing about that was all the pictures that they took supposedly on the moon. There were no stars, and you should have been able to see stars. And there wasn't not one picture that showed stars.
Nope, not one. That's right. Yeah, that and many other anomalies that just when you put it all together really don't add up. I gave a full a full hearing on that in one of my other books. Nothing in this book is true, but it's exactly how things are. And I had so much fun doing it. That was just a lot of fun to unpack that one. So I didn't even mention it in Catching the Ascension Wave, but for some reason it's coming out now. But the secret space program, we have to go back way into the 1930s when I first heard about it way back in 1990 during one great awakening I had through a whistleblower by the name of Bill Cooper, and he was talking about it. And what he said is that in 1936, I think he said, the Germans they came in contact with a disk. He didn't know if it was a crashed disk or if it was one that was given to them by certain ETs. But I just kept looking at that, and goodness sakes, that took many years to fully unpack. It wasn't until David Wilcock, bless his soul, he helped me out so much with that, and he gave a really nice understanding of what really happened there. And what he said was that well, I'll come back to David Wilcock in a moment, but first we need to go back into World War II a little bit. There was a guy by the name of William Tompkins. When he was 93 years old in the year 2015, he wrote a book called Selected by Extraterrestrials, where he revealed that he was in contact ever since childhood and became what I guess you could call a very valuable asset to the U.S. Navy. But you go back to the days of World War II when Tompkins was just a really young guy, couldn't have been more than 20 years old, yet he was put in charge of 23 spies who had successfully infiltrated the German secret space program. And what he discovered is that they had been given the real technology, the UFOs, the real deal, the real thing, brand new ships and how to use them and all the rest of that. And they were also given a place down in Antarctica underneath the ice where they could store all of this and build their ships and do their thing down there. Well, there's 23 American spies who successfully infiltrated this, and William Tompkins was put in charge of these guys, and the stories that Tompkins had to tell are just nothing short of amazing. Now, to fast forward to 1952, one of the great events that any documentary you see on UFOs is always going to talk about the fleet of UFOs that circled the Capitol way back in 1952. But it wasn't until I unpacked what David Wilcock had to say that it really began to make sense. And what he said was that they were not ETs, they were Germans. And that the Germans, even though they lost the ground war quite decisively, they did win the space war. And they had been to the moon, they'd been to Mars and the rest of the planets, is even in the 1940s. And so that was all a function of the technology that they had been given. Well, in 1952, they were the ones who buzzed the Capitol. In essence, what they were doing was they were signaling the U.S. government, hey, we'd like to make contact with you guys and make an offer to you. Now, we in the U.S., even though we had the remains of the Roswell crash in 1947, evidently we hadn't figured out what anti-gravity was and how to use it. And the Germans came along and says, well, we're willing to help you, but we have to sign a treaty. And of course, they definitely wanted something out of that, and that is exactly what they got. They were able to combine Operation Paperclip, which most people have heard of, with infiltrating, the CIA and the government, and in ways very, very useful to them and meaningful ways to them, but detrimental ways to the greater good of the USA. Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his outgoing message in January of 1961, he tried to warn us when he talked about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. in that sense has, basically what he was saying is that was the treaty that was signed back. We waited 3 years until 1955 to finally capitulate and said, okay, we'll go along with you. Probably didn't really have much of a choice. And so the two space programs, the secret space programs, were combined, and it's gotten to the point, Barbara, where William Tompkins says that to make a relative long story short, we have not only developed all the anti-gravity technology, had it for a long, long time, but have been not only throughout our galaxy, but William Tompkins, when he was 93 years old, said also to other galaxies. So you try that on for size, and then contrast that versus what Apollo is trying to tell us, what our space program is all about, and you begin to realize that, as William Tompkins said, we've been lied to in just about every way possible, and it is time to lift the veil and to begin to wake up. And in many ways, I consider my book to be a wake-up call. Not that I'm the first person to bring all this out. I'm not. But I did bring it together and put it together in such a way that probably nobody else has done. And the wake-up call is such that, it can ruffle a few feathers, but on the other hand, I believe it's absolutely necessary. And my sense of it is that because we are very much in a state of awakening due to the higher vibratory energy that's coming into the Earth, that, these things are going to be revealed anyway. And if I can jump the gun a little bit and act as a bit of a catalyst, well, first of all, I love to do that sort of thing. And secondly, I'm willing to do it. So here we are.
Well, I think that especially with a secret space program, they don't have much choice. But the corruption that is so rampant in so many areas but it's all beginning to fall apart. So that
yes, it is.
Happily, we're beginning to see, as things crumble, we're beginning to see where there has been corruption, where there has been a misuse of funds, and certainly at this moment in time, and it's only my perspective, but it feels like the government is bent on destroying the country, not protecting it. And
yep.
because that's going on, it means that we're going to have to restructure, and in order to restructure, we have to go down to the roots and really make sure we get rid of where the corruption actually started from. And
it's a big
task.
A
lot of it. Oh, it's a deep hole. It's a really deep hole. It's been out there since.
The rabbit hole goes very, very deep. Really, what we're talking about here is that you go back to the Galactic Super Wave that's coming in, and so talking about the secret space program, they're well aware of this. They've taken their ships out there and experienced it firsthand. Not only that, we've been warned, if you will, by ET contacts ever since the 1950s that this is indeed what's happening. So now to come back to more present day, the secret space program, what they said is that the impact it had on the crew members was that the ones who were of a positive nature became more positive, and those who were a bit negative became a bit triggered by it, if you will, and at least temporarily became even more triggered. Well, what it is,
right.
it's a cosmic dust cloud of much, much higher vibratory energy that's coming in and impacting the entire solar system and everyone and everything in the entire solar system. That includes every person right here on planet Earth. And what it's doing is creating a displacement process. The displacement process is such that the higher vibratory energy, the energy of unity, of joyfulness, of inner peace, of creativity, of inspiration, all the good stuff, unconditional love and compassion and wisdom, all of that is a function of the higher vibratory, higher dimensional energy. And it's coming in and creating a displacement process with the denser vibratory energy of fear, which is and living life conceptually out of our reactive mind rather than a living presence. That lower vibratory energy, not only of fear, but of frustration and, all the, I can go on and on with that. And, I think what I mean. What it's doing is creating this displacement process and stirring things up, both individually and collectively. And so we've been warned or told or advised ever since the 1950s that you can't escape this. It's going to impact every single person on the planet. And if we can learn how to catch the wave, which I do believe are in process of doing on an individual level, that means that we will be able to ride the wave, if you will, into the higher vibratory aspects of awareness, of, unconditional love and truth and beauty, and let go of the lower vibratory stuff of resentment and fear and those types of things. It doesn't mean that the ride's going to be gentle or easy all the time.
No.
But if so there will be some bumps in the roads. But hopefully, if you got new tires and are up to the task, you can navigate this quite well. Look, it's all contained within each and every one of us. Our innate ability is such that we're all connected to Source. When we're living life out of a reactive mind, we're quite capable of blocking that, almost, if not completely. But it doesn't negate the fact that we still are one with the one infinite Creator. And as we raise our vibratory rate, it increasingly becomes our reality. But just one more point before I shut up here for a moment, and that is that it's also affecting everything on the planet, and that is the global darkness. And so I spend some time just digging into that. Just what do I mean by the global darkness? How did we get to the place to where we are? So relatively bound in fear and limitation. And is there outside forces that have had an impact on us who have been trying to keep us that way, to keep us under their control, so that they can, do their thing, which does not have our best interests at heart, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on, but maybe you'd like to add something here.
Well, throughout history, there have been times when all there was war and destruction and, conquering and power struggles between different nations. And we've had this before. I don't know how many times, but more times than history can count. And so, without really paying attention to it, we're into one of those time frames. Our country is being overrun by people who didn't originate here. We're being invaded, and nobody notices it. And it's sort of like there are
people are starting to notice it. People are starting to notice it.
But when you talk about the individual level of energy that people have, I think one of the things that is so important for people to understand, you can take all the classes you want, you can do all the things you think are the right way to do this, but until you have that ascension, until you feel that ascension as part of you, you cannot BS the universe. You're either there or you're not. And I have met in my long lifetime, I have met a lot of people who talk about they have ascended, they are part of a greater whatever, brotherhood or whatever, and yet they have their hands out to be paid a ton of money to be invited along on the trip, which is not the way you do it. It's an individual, independent journey you take inside of yourself to reach this place inside of yourself, to the portal to love and to sharing and to the magnificent connection with the infinite that we all have. So it's kind of interesting watching today people, they're struggling so to survive they aren't paying it. They're paying attention more to their physical needs than to their spiritual needs, and that takes them out of balance. And I'm not saying you don't work hard to get money to feed your family, because you do, but there's that other aspect here that is so important, that is, it doesn't take forever to get to, but you have to be focused on getting there. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, Barbara, the first distinction I would make is the distinction between knowing something conceptually and getting it inside you, so that you become the living embodiment of what you previously only knew conceptually.
Right.
But they're talking about the displacement process, how the global darkness is coming to the surface, and it's absolutely necessary. Not only the global darkness coming to the surface, but the individual darkness within each and every one of us is also coming to the surface, so that it can be transmuted into the light of the higher vibratory energy, so that it can integrate, if you will, and become the new reality. And so I go into great detail just about, what transmutation of energy is and integration of energy is. You can use those two terms simultaneously, and how it's happening on an individual level and how it's happening also on a collective level, and how even though the road can be a bit rough at times, it is absolutely necessary. Because we need, on a collective level, we need to wake up to the reality of, as William Tompkins said, we've been lied to in just about every conceivable way. That includes, we'll take your pick, mathematics, physics, and you name it. He said, basically, Tompkins went on to say that everything we think we know is a lie. I don't know, maybe that's taking it a little bit too far, but maybe not, And so there is a controlling force that has been on this planet for a long, long time. They're still there, but they're no longer the infusion of higher dimensional energy is bringing them out of the shadows and into the light, to where they can be seen for their controlling and manipulating ways. And so to keep us, basically, if you want to control, if you're a small group, if you want to control an entire planet, what you do is keep them in fear and ignorance, and you hoard the sacred knowledge for yourself. Well, they've been doing that for a long, long time, but their time is up right now, and they're just playing out their last hands. They've already lost the game, and they know it, but they're not going to go away quietly. So we are waking up and beginning to realize that we have been lied and controlled in just about every conceivable way, and kept in survival as much as possible. If you have to focus on just barely making ends meet so you can pay your bills every month, you don't have a whole lot of time left to think and to contemplate, spirituality and the higher worlds and all that. And, of course, that's by design, not by accident. But that being said, there is a great awakening that's occurring, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing that can stop it. Absolutely nothing. As I suggested earlier, and you did too, we're at the end of a certain cycle. One good way of seeing that is to begin to unpack the precession of the equinoxes, that 25,000 plus 920-year cycle, to begin to just see what's really going on here, and why there is this tremendous infusion of higher vibratory energy that's coming in, that's stirring things up and creating the absolutely necessary transformation into higher consciousness.
I think one of the fascinating things about your book is that you talk about darkness and fear, and a lot of people just shove it down. And your book talks about, you don't shove it down, you take it out, you expose it to the light, you dissipate it until the fear is gone, and then you incorporate it into yourself. So you become more powerful by not hiding it, but by embracing it. And it's sort of like you get rid of the darkness by turning a light on. You become the light,
well,
and when you turn it on, that
it's
fear.
just a universal principle. It's just a universal principle, Barbara, and that is that darkness cannot survive in the presence of light. And what I'm talking about here on an individual and a collective level is that the darkness cannot survive when it meets the light of our conscious awareness. It just simply cannot. It gets transmuted into the light. Really, it's analogous in every way to you go into a completely darkened room. You can't see a thing, but yet the moment you flip on the light switch, the darkness disappears. Darkness cannot survive in the presence of light. And so as we learn to shine the light of our conscious awareness on the darkness within our souls, we learn that resisting it is not going to work, that quite the contrary, expanding to include it is the only thing that ever has and ever will work. Now talk about living in a culture in which we've been, to be blunt about it, lied to in just about every conceivable way. We live in a culture where it's been considered that, symptoms are bad and terrible and awful, and you get symptoms, well, they're terrible, and you better run and see the doctor just as soon as you can, and don't worry, the doctor will fix you. Only problem is that it usually doesn't get fixed because allopathic medicine is only treating symptoms and never gets to the root cause of the problem. So there's some universal principles that I unpack in the book. I'm going to focus on three of them right now. One of them I call the perfection principle, and what it says basically is that you and I are perfect, yet we have barriers to the experience and the perfection and the expression of that divine perfection. And so with regard to those barriers, what the second universal law says is that resistance leads to persistence. In other words, whatever you and I resist, and fundamentally what we're resisting is the barriers that keep us from the experience and expression of our divine perfection. Whenever you and I resist that, and we live in a culture where we've been conditioned to do, and so we don't know any better. But resistance only leads to persistence, meaning it only gives you more of what you don't like and what you don't want. Then the third universal law that I unpacked is what I call the harmonizing principle. I gave it that name because I think it's the perfect name. And what it says is the exact opposite of resistance. It says that if you can expand to include what previously you have been resisting, then what happens is that you develop and discover your innate ability to transform or to transmute that energy into life-enhancing energy so you can get off the dime and move ahead. And what I'm talking about, if you go back to Tesla, if you want to understand the universe, as Tesla said, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Now we come down to an individual level and we think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. The question is, is our vibratory rate? When we're stuck in all the barriers that keep us from experiencing and expressing the divine perfection that we are, that's the first universal law, then we're vibrating at a very dense rate because the fear has taken over, the resentment has taken over, the anxiety has taken over, and you can just go on and on with that. But as we learn to step out of the resistance principle and begin to embrace the harmonizing principle, then we begin to realize that if we can go into and connect with the energetic component of the resistance, then we have begun to discover our innate ability to transmute that energy. Now, I need to unpack that a bit more because what I want to say is critically important to understanding what I just meant by what I just said. And that is that if you stop and think that whether it's you or me individually or collectively, because we live in a mind-based world and because the mind is polarized and does not connect the dots and does not see wholeness, and as I continue, that'll begin to, I think, become more and more clear. Because the mind is polarized, you and I individually and collectively are in a constant state of judgment. And what I mean by that is that we look out at the reality, and if we see an individual and or if we see a situation that does not conform to the idealized standard that our mind is telling us, that this person should be like this or the situation should be like that, and if it doesn't conform to the idealized standard of our mind, then we very much have a tendency to judge it or to make it wrong, as I like to call it. And so every time we do that, every time we make someone or something wrong, there's two components. It's really two different versions of the same thing. The first component is conceptual. This person really is bad and wrong. And then we tend to believe our make wrongs because it takes the form then of I'm right and you're wrong. And usually there's a significant degree of emotional charge that's associated with that. I'm right and you're wrong. And you couldn't, and yada, 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 and all that stuff. And then you got the story, the narrative to go with that. So that's the first component. But the second component, which is really the same thing perceived through a different internal sense, is the energetic component, the actual sensation or the feeling itself that gets generated from the concept, from the conceptual thing. And the conceptual aspect of it is you're making somebody or something wrong and attaching emotional charge to it, and what that instantly creates is a pattern of energy. An energetic component in your body that we can simply call a sensation, or even more basic than that, just call it a feeling. And so because the original thought is a make-wrong thought, this thing or this person really is bad and wrong, the instantly generating pattern of energy or feeling can only be an unpleasant feeling. And because you and I are thoroughly conditioned to want to feel good, I mean, goodness sakes, we all do. We all want to feel good, and because we live in a culture where we haven't learned how to consciously deal with energy, we do our utmost to avoid feeling that. It's called suppression, and I unpack that in great detail in the book because it's really important to know that, we all have our favorite ways of trying to avoid or deny the unpleasant feeling that gets generated because we want to feel good again. And so the thing is that it kind of works temporarily, but over the course of the long haul, it doesn't work at all, because every time we avoid and try and distance ourselves from feeling that unpleasant energy, it doesn't go away. It continues to live in the body in the form of what I call stuck energy. And now you stop and think of all the times that you've made somebody or something wrong, and you begin to realize there's a whole lot of stuck energy living in our individual and collective bodies. And so what do you do with that? Well, what I'm suggesting is that everything is a function of consciousness, and we need to learn to step away from the resistance principle, that resisting it is only going to give us more of what we don't want and don't like, and begin to embrace the harmonizing principle. And what the harmonizing principle says now, if you can allow yourself to go into that packet of unpleasant feeling energy in your body that is a function of the make wrong, and learn to find a more useful way of relating to it than making wrong. In other words, find a way to allow it on a feeling level to be exactly the way it is, so you can begin to feel it fully and thoroughly and accurately and honestly. Then and only then will you begin to discover your innate ability to transmute, to transform what had been life-detracting stuck energy into life-enhancing energy that allows you not only to get on with life, but to do it in a way that allows you to discover the present moment. And it's only in the present moment where creativity and inspiration and joyfulness and inner peace and all that stuff exists. Because then and only then, in the present moment, are you connecting with your heartfelt connection to Source, your higher self. So I've said a lot there, I realize. I hope some of that got through.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think one of the places I step on the soapbox about is your creativity. And the creativity is in many ways the fuel of your energy and your life that moves things along. Without the connection to creation, in order to become creative, you have to have that link. It has to be there. And
so well said. The connection to creation, to be creative. That's great. I love it. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
This is one of my soapbox moments. And when people
yeah,
tell
well, you're
me
on the soapbox. You're on a roll.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So when people say I'm stuck in life, I don't know what to do and where to go, and my first question to them is, what are you doing creatively? And, they'll say, I'm too busy to do creative stuff. And the answer back is, well, until you get creative in your life, creation won't move you ahead. So I suggest you find something creative. And it's
so
true. It's the breath of life. It's what moves us
so
along.
Good.
And you don't have to be Rembrandt or Longfellow, or it doesn't have to be creative in the sense that I can sell these paintings or anything like that, because I have found, and this is only my own personal whatever, but I have found that when I am being creative for the sake of creation, when I am getting the joy out of creating something that to me is special, it may not be perfect, but if I get joy out of it, that's all that counts. But if I sell it, if I get money for it, I can't double dip. So I have to be creative in another place, in another way, without being compensated for it.
Well, what I would suggest is that you're underlining the shift that we're in the process of making, and that is that it's the shift from living life conceptually out of the reactive mind, which does not know the present moment, does not connect the dots, does not see wholeness. And what I mean by it does not know the present moment, what I suggest is that we see the present through the eyes of the past. In other words, we see the present moment when we're living life conceptually through the eyes of the unresolved emotional trauma that to some degree everyone experiences, beginning at birth and certainly continuing through childhood. And as long as that stuff remains unresolved, you're going to continue to live life conceptually out of the reactive conceptual mind. And so what the mind is and what it will do is completely block you from the present moment, and in so doing completely block you from your heartfelt connection to source, your higher self. And it's only in the present moment, only when the heartfelt connection to source is open, that creativity and inspiration and all the good things and joyfulness and inner peace, all the goodies in life, it's only then when they appear. And they appear, you can have them in unlimited abundance, but you have to be present in order to create it. And so that's I would suggest is the shift.
I think also when you go from a thinking into a feeling aspect, that's to me where the crossover is. It's not I'm thinking about doing so that I feel this is appropriate. When I'm working and writing something or whatever, I wait for the feeling. And sometimes somebody will say to me, well, why aren't you doing this? And it's like the feeling isn't there yet. And when the feeling gets there, I will rip stuff out like you won't believe. But I have to be in a place where I have that feeling of a flow through me. And once that feeling of the flow is there.
Yeah, that's the connection to source right there.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's magical. And the other part about it is, if you're wondering, am I connected or not, the one way that I totally have, as far as myself, have learned, is that if when you're done doing whatever creative thing you're doing, if you are energized, joyful, and excited about life, then you've been there. And if you're not, if you're tired and you need to take a nap, then you've been using your physical energy instead of your spiritual energy.
Yeah, mind-based creation instead of conceptual creation instead of living presence. That's the distinction. That's the shift right there, absolutely. So
well,
I think
if you look at a musician, same training, with the same backgrounds and everything. One of them is a technician and gets every note right, and the other is an artist and is able to paint with the music. And I think it's the same premise here. If being technically appropriate is a thinking thing, and flowing and creating magic is a spiritual thing.
Well, the truth is we need them both. But Lynn, I just would. Well, give me a moment to stand in my soapbox, and I'll unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
What I suggested earlier is that, you know, the mind is conceptual and it doesn't see wholeness, it doesn't connect the dots, but it has to be shown. It has to be shown unity, because in the separate state, we've got our conceptual side and we have our intuitive side. The conceptual side is living life conceptually out of the mind, which again doesn't see wholeness, doesn't connect the dots, isn't in the present moment. The intuitive side is a heartfelt connection to Source, which only knows unity. It doesn't think it, it knows it on a very deep, innate level. And but the two sides are, in their current separate state, are like a bad marriage, the two partners, one can be speaking absolute honest truth, and the other one still cannot hear it. It's going to hear control and manipulation, or, something other than what the intent of the message is. So the mind has to be shown, and it has to be shown in the only way it can be shown, and that is step by step logically, that there is only one creation pattern that moves throughout all of the universe. There is only one reality. There is only one spirit. There is only one infinite creator throughout all of it. And so you do it step by step. I have looked at it in great detail through the universal language called sacred geometry, where you can use that language to speak about anything because it is wholeness. It does absolutely show the holographic nature of the reality. And it does it in a very interesting way that the mind, the logical mind, can grab onto. So that's one way of showing the mind, which doesn't see and connect to wholeness, that there really is just one spirit moving through all life everywhere. Then and only then can communication begin to happen, because the corpus callosum, the connecting, the middle, separating the left brain from the right brain, begins to open up and send the communication in a way that the both sides can begin to get it. And so now you've got true communication going on. Yeah, you can't just take the mind and throw it out the window. It's an extremely useful entity as long as it's restored back to its proper role. It never, ever was intended to be the master of our consciousness. It just assumed that because we made it as such. We fell into a world in which we became totally identified with our mind and living life conceptually rather than as a living presence. So it's like the mind knew it was never big enough for the task, so it developed an ego and all sorts of righteousness and whatever to try and compensate. But really, the mind is not our master, and if we can restore it back to its rightful role as a faithful servant of our consciousness, this is what I'm getting at. And this is when the communication begins to open up, because we're living life out of our true master, our connection to Source, our higher self. And now life begins to make a shift from a black and white conceptual world to the world of living color with surround sound stereo. And life becomes an exciting adventure day. I mean, Helen Keller said it perfectly. If anybody ever had a reason to not want to get out of bed, it would have been her. Yet she said, life is either an exciting adventure or it's nothing. And that is exactly what she was talking about. So.
Oh, yeah. So what happens now? We're basically third dimensional, looking to merge into, evolve into, ascend into fourth dimensional. Now, is there a fifth, sixth, and seventh dimension, or is fourth dimension it? Okay.
No.
So the same process will be ongoing?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, life is an absolute exciting adventure, and when you're present, it never ends. There's always something to grow into and evolve into and to become. And if there wasn't, oh boy, this is going to be so much fun to unpack this, because there was a time when there was no veiling. But I just want to throw that out and come back to it a little bit later. So I kind of lost my train of thought here. I get so excited, carried away. Where was I going with all of this?
There is more than the fourth dimension.
Oh, yeah, more than fourth dimension, thanks. Yeah, well, let's start with fourth dimension. There is a document called the Law of One that is just an amazing document. Going back to the ancient builder race, it's a series of books. It's also available online. The first Law of One book was called The Raw Material by Ra, who is a humble messenger of the Law of One. But Ra is just a name for this collective sixth density extraterrestrial source, the ancient builder race, as we call it. So Ra actually is the ancient builder race, and that's where this information came from. And what the Law of One makes perfectly clear is that the fourth dimension, or fourth density as they call it, is a world that, if you can imagine this, Barbara, is 100 times, at least 100 times more harmonious, more joyful, more all the goodies in life than even your very best moments, here in third dimension or third density Earth. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. What do you think?
Oh yeah, but my philosophy is, if I'm not growing, there's no point. So
okay,
put me in paradise,
that's where we're going.
I want to see what's next.
That's where we're going. So it's 100 times more harmonious, 100 times more joyful, 100 times more loving, 100 times more creative and inspirational than even your very best moments here. But they go on to say, yet it is still only fourth density. There's still fifth, sixth, and seventh before you transverse this world, and even then you're only going to end up into a higher octave of universes. But in so doing, the veil continues to lift increasingly, so that you become closer and closer and closer to the living embodiment of the one infinite creator. Life continues to just unpack itself in a way that it just never ever ends. And so the Ra, the Law of One material, is coming from this Ra, this collective sixth density extraterrestrial source that we know as the ancient builder race. And what they say is that for them it's impossible for them to see us as separate entities, because they are so immersed in this oneness thing, being sixth dimensional or sixth density, that their interpretation of the reality is such a vast upgrade from where we are right now, and still such a vast upgrade from fourth density that we can't really even begin to contemplate what it might be like at that level. But oh boy, they have done their thing and then some, because you start unpacking the Law of One, it's really good stuff. It is really good.
It is.
And it just gives the details. So
one thing that you've spoken of is there are dark energies that are working against us, trying to prevent us from attaining this, and yet we have a single source of all creation, and that single source had to create the negative as well as the positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it serves its purpose. And that is just so much fun to talk about, because according to the Law on One, there was a time way back in the beginning days of the universe, when everyone, every being, every person on all the different, throughout all the different galaxies, was in full awareness of their total intimate connection to the one infinite creator. There was no veiling. And so, you would think, wow, that would be absolutely amazing. That would be totally, completely fantastic. The Law of One says, hey, just a minute here, not so fast. No, it was a disaster, they go on to say. It was a disaster because everybody was just just blissed out, just sitting around for lifetime after lifetime, just totally blissed out in full realization on every level of their intimate connection to all that is. And so as a result of that, there was no creativity, there was no growth. And somebody at some level realized, this isn't working so well, something better be done here. And so what happened is a veiling was created. It's just a huge problem. And so the veiling was that there was this, we made a shift from disembodied no-form awareness into the belief that we are an individual identity who is cut off from the source and has virtually no connection to the higher powers within us. And so this is all out of the law of one. Well, I added a quote by a Central American shaman that I thought pretty well sums it all up. And this guy said, well, we are perceivers, we're awareness, we're not objects, we have no solidity, and we're boundless. But he went on to say that, well, we forget this, and we entrap the totality of ourselves in a vicious circle from which we rarely emerge in our lifetime. And what he's talking about there is the veiling, that we get trapped into the illusion that we're a separate self, and that we get stuck in what the Hindus and the Mayas call Maya. The delusion, the belief that you're an individual, the belief that you're not the whole, that you're not the universe, and we get stuck into what Alan Watts liked to call the game of hide and seek. Hide and seek, one of my favorite authors back in the day, Alan Watts, brought that out. And what he said was that, it's like, he was talking about, before the veiling, God doesn't like to be bored, because if you get too bored, there's no creativity and nothing really happens. So in order to keep the game interesting, what God does, the one spirit moving through all life, is he hides him and herself in the form of you and me. Now, if you want to make the game really fun and really interesting, you want to, be sure that it takes a long time, in fact, to, uncover the truth. Because if you found yourself too quickly, that'd be no fun. You need to let it play out for a while. And you need to go through eons of lifetimes pretending that you're separate from and that you're not yourself, but you're just this individual in disguise pretending to be, some isolated, lonely individual. But after a while, that gets kind of old, and it's time to wake up and discover that, well, gee, it was just a game, and it was fun while it lasted. But after a while, it might become kind of interesting again to wake up and realize that you are the one infinite creator, and you're a hologram, a perfectly functioning hologram of the whole. You're creating the whole thing. So that, in a nutshell, is what began to happen. And interestingly enough, the universe began to work. Because what it allowed for and what it did was push started to come to shove, and creativity and inspiration began to appear. And all good things started happening, like music and creativity in the form of art, and you can go on and on with that, began to appear. But there also was a downside. It might seem to be a downside, but it's also a very necessary downside, and that was the appearance of negativity. And as awful as and bad and frustrating as it might seem at times, in the larger scheme of things, in the context of oneness, it's there because it needs to be there, because it creates this push-pull. That just like you and I have shared, life has to paint you into a corner sometimes in order to convince you, if you will, to wake up enough to make some necessary changes in your life. And that's the value of negativity.
Well, yeah, and it's a challenge, and actually I have found that every challenge that I have had to face in my life, while being a difficult time, was an exciting time because it was a challenge I knew I could overcome. It was just a matter of how, and that draws on your creativity.
Yes, absolutely. And that again speaks to the nature of the shift that needs to be made, and that is that instead of letting the challenges stop you, you learn to use them to your advantage instead of allowing them to keep you in really what I like to call victim consciousness, where you've given your power away to such an extent that you're quite convinced that none of it lies within you, so you're reduced to looking to outside sources to try and show you the way to go. And so the challenges then are insurmountable. They will stop you. But the shift is that if you can take what previously would have stopped you and learn to use it as an opportunity so that you become empowered by it, so that you move through it, now you're in the zone, you're humming. And so you are using your creative powers. You're learning to connect to source and learning to transmute the energy that previously stopped you into life-enhancing energy so that you can move ahead again. And life becomes an exciting challenge. Challenges are to be embraced, not to be shunned.
Oh, I know. There have been a number of times in my life when somebody said to me, "You can't do this. I'll do it for you." And then after the first time, I said, "This is ridiculous. I'm fully confident with most of my marbles. Why can't I learn this?" And it's saying to yourself, "I can do this." It may be a struggle, and I may not do it as well, but I can do it for myself. And I think since I had an experience in which somebody told me I couldn't do something, and they literally stole my website, and I had to get somebody to hack back into my own website to get it back. And it was because I had listened to somebody telling me I couldn't do something, and I had actually believed them. And I don't believe that anymore. I may not want to learn something, but I can if I have to. And I think that's a point that I think most of us have to come to, that you can do almost anything. But you have to be willing to put the work into it. And with this wave coming at us, I think most people are feeling the challenge and not knowing what to do with it or how to do it. And so, where do they look for people saying, "I know things are crazy. I know things are coming. I don't know what to do." I have a friend who is buying tons and tons of prepper food, so that when there is no food, she's going to have food. But I tried to explain to her that while this is on a physical level going to happen, the most important part of it is happening in spirit. It's not the physical that is going to get her. It's the spiritual part. And you spoke about people who were not ready to ascend, would be taken off and put on a third dimensional world to continue their process and stuff. You want to talk a little bit about that? That would be a fun topic to go into. Going back to the Law of One and the ancient builder race, which is important to take at least something of a look at, because they originated on Venus. And you go back 2.6 billion years ago, that's when Venus went through their dimensional shift, went from third dimension, or third density if you prefer, to fourth density. And at the time, they only had 38 million people on their entire planet. So evidently conditions there were a bit harsher than they are here on Earth. 38 million people, goodness sakes. And about 6 million of them made it through into the fourth dimension, into the fourth density. They became the ancient builder race. So the question is, well, what happened to the other 32 million people on Venus? And the answer is, well, they weren't just tossed out the window, if you will. The infinite creator is definitely a benevolent force. And what happens is that they were taken to another third density planet where they were allowed to, live through however many lifetimes they need to in order to alleviate enough karma so that they too could become ascension ready. And so that evidently is the way that it works.
There are certain ET races. The ancient builder race was one of them that very much participated in this process back in the day. But there are certain ET races, certain aspects of the Greys, for example. One of their main functions seems to be to come into a planet and literally prepare the people who are not third, fourth dimensional ready to clone them, if you will, into clone bodies that would be more capable of handling the third dimensional world that they soon will be taken to, just prior to the shift and all the changes that happen on the planet as it moves from third density into fourth density. You wouldn't want to be here when that's going on, and fortunately you won't be. You'll either go with the planet as it shifts into the fourth dimension, into the much higher vibratory world, where everything will be fine and wonderful and 100 times more harmonious, or you will be taken to another third dimensional planet. Now, the law of one says that typically, and this is all tied to certain, the 25,920 year cycle that we know as the precession of the equinoxes. And they say that there are 3 of these 25,000 plus year cycles to be aware of. And that is that at the end of the first 25,920 year cycle, typically on a typical planet, about 40% of the people ascend into fourth density, and the remainder will be taken to another third dimensional planet, where, as I said, they will be given however many lifetimes and reincarnations it takes to become ascension ready. So that's at the end of the first 25,900 year cycle. At the end of the second cycle, the law of one says that most everyone who was left, who didn't make it the first time, will make it into fourth density at this time. And at the end of the third cycle, if there's anybody left over, the entire planet will be, as they say, harvested. And harvested means that everybody will be taken off the planet, hopefully into fourth density. But if there's still someone who's not ascension ready, they again will be taken to another third dimensional planet. Okay, with that said, what happened here on planet Earth is that after the end of the first 25,000 year cycle, nobody ascended. Oh, well, hello. At the end of the second 25,920 year cycle, only 157 people ascended, and they all stayed with the Earth and became ascended masters. Well, here we are at the end of the third cycle, and the great question is, what's going to happen now? Well, that's just creating a whole lot of stuff to unpack, because first of all, there's the question of the Earth changes that are likely to happen, although it's not chiseled into stone. What causes that? And then there's the question of who's going to make it through into the higher worlds and who isn't. What will happen to those who aren't? They will be taken to another third dimensional planet, and those who are ascension ready are going to be taken into the fourth dimension. So to backtrack that a little bit, the usual scenario is that there will be Earth changes, which are, from the cosmic viewpoint, it's really not that big a deal. It's just a necessary cleansing that has to happen, because what it is an outward iteration of the internal disharmony, if you will, that we've been living through on an individual and collective basis for a long, long time now. And so it manifests itself out there, too, in the form of pole shifts, and also in the form of what is traditionally called a solar flash, where, to look at what actually happened on March 24th of 2017 on Proxima Centauri, our closest neighbor, 4.2 light years away, it was observed from Earth here that for a period of about 10 seconds, the sun, Proxima Centauri, increased in brightness by about 1,000-fold. Well, that's enough to do to turn everything on a third-dimensional planet into a crispy critter for sure. The whole thing happened over the course of about 10 minutes. what it is a solar flash. And usually it happens as third-dimensional planets are ready to go 4D because it's a necessary cleansing. It's not seen as in the higher life forms as a big deal at all. But with that said, you wouldn't want to be here because if you were, you wouldn't survive it. It's going to activate all the underground volcanoes, the mid-Atlantic ridge, the undersea volcanoes. Sulfuric acid is going to rain in the skies. There's going to bury the Earth between 40 to 400 feet of rock, and you wouldn't want to be here. And don't worry, you won't be. The third density aspect of the planet needs some time to recover. Let's put it that way. So it can become habitable again at some date in the future. But what happens in the interim is that those who are ascension ready will just, life will, you just go into this higher vibratory world. Life is great. It's 100 times more harmonious. And those who are not are taken to another third dimensional planet. So all of that stuff is just, what creates the shift of the ages. Now, hopefully, we're on the optimal timeline where the Earth changes, the violent Earth changes, do not have to happen. And if we can continue to make this shift, make this dramatic transformation individually and collectively, then we can do it in a very harmonious way. And of course, that's what's bringing us into present time reality here, where we're in the midst of all of it. What I allude to, and I'm not the first one who does it, but amongst other people, we call it the dark night of the soul, where all this displacement is happening, and it's creating some rather bumpy moments for just about everyone. But it's important to learn that everything is a function of consciousness. And I suggest that learning how to discover and master our innate ability to transmute energy is really key in all of this. So it enables you to get on with it.
One of the things take a breath.
Yes, I need to take one, and I will.
One of the things that I noticed was not mentioned in your book, and would to me be a very important thing. Not that it matters in the grand scheme of things, but I think it does in a way. What about the animals? Because they are, on a spiritual level, I certainly can relate to my animals. I can see how animals and humans can interrelate, and they can be of great benefit to one another. So are you killing off all the animals on the planet when you do this ascension thing?
No. No. Animals are a great blessing. One of the great things that's happened here on planet Earth is that we have such an incredible variety of animals. Some of my very best teachers are animals. I talk in my book in a bunch of my books about how one of my greatest teachers of all time was my cat named Freddie, who showed me just by pure example the shift that I had to make. And that is what I mean is I had to shift from making my back injury wrong and resisting it, which is all I really knew how to do, to going with the flow of it. And the way that showed up is that way back in the day in 1980, Freddie became paralyzed. His two rear legs were just totally, completely paralyzed. He couldn't move them. But the beauty of it all is that he was still Freddie. He totally present and just in the moment of life, and just his heartfelt, loving self. In that sense, absolutely nothing had changed for him. He was still being my very best friend, good old Freddie. And he could inch himself forward. He could move around a little bit, and he was getting by. But the one who was upset by it was me, and I just kept thinking, this is so unfair. Why did this happen to Freddie? But it turned out to be one of the greatest teachings probably the greatest teaching. I'll continue with that by suggesting that Freddie and I were sitting back in the backyard in the patio one fine day, and it just began to dawn on me. It just grew within me, and it just began with a heartfelt thought that there's absolutely no reason why he couldn't be totally and completely healed. It just grew and it grew and grew and it grew until I felt it and I knew it with certainty throughout every cell of my inner body, and in that moment, it became a reality. Literally in that moment, Freddie was completely healed. It's just like he never suffered from paralysis again. And so, needless to say, I was quite pleased. But that's only the beginning, because a couple of weeks or so later, he came back from one of his daily adventures throughout his territory, and everything was just fine, except one of his eyelids was shut, completely shut. And he couldn't open it and did not open it for about 2 weeks. And the reason he didn't open it is that when it finally did open, it revealed itself to be not an eyeball anymore, but more resembling a piece of dead meat, just a piece of dead flesh. And so, oh, goodness sakes, almost the exact same scenario happened again. Totally spontaneous. I didn't think it. I didn't plan it. I went through the same poor Freddie, and I was, upset and feeling sorry for him and all that. Why him? And in virtually the same setting, in the patio, in the evening, I sitting with Freddie, and the same thing happened again. It grew and grew and grew as an inner feeling and inner realization until I knew and felt with certainty in every cell of my body that there is absolutely no reason why he cannot be perfectly and completely healed. And in that moment, his eyeball opened, and what I saw was a completely normal, healthy, healed eyeball. And
wow.
Yes, that's right. Wow. And I kind of pinched myself every once in a while and wondered, did that really happen? And the answer is, yeah, it absolutely really did happen. There's more to that story, but I don't know if I want to go into it right now, except to make the point that what it served to me was an absolute catalyst in my awakening and my understanding when finally I began to realize, and it took me about 12 years to fully unpack that, but I finally began to realize that resisting and making my back wrong was only giving me more of what I didn't like and didn't want, and that I got to find a better way of relating to it. And I began to see that Freddie, even in the moment of what I considered was, to be a terrible predicament for him, didn't seem to be bothering him at all. He was just being Freddie, joyful and loving and present and living by pure example. And suddenly, in a certain moment, it just clicked. The inner light bulb went off, and I just realized, my goodness, I've got to stop fighting, I've got to stop resisting, and I have to start finding a way to embrace what, I've been fighting for too many years now, and that hasn't worked. And what it showed me is that by going into, and I'm talking about the feeling level, and man, I got to tell you, it did not feel good to be crippled and half paralyzed. Did not feel good at all. But I had to find a way to go into feel it and stop making it wrong and accept the feeling as it is, whether I liked it or not. And as I learned to do that, I began to realize that there's an alternative to resistance, and that's what I call the harmonizing principle. And it began to completely shift my life. And I, out of that, began to discover my innate ability to heal myself. So I don't know what got me off on that tangent, but I'm kind of glad it did. I forgot what your question was.
I asked about the animals.
Yeah, look, the animals are going to be taken care of. Do not worry about the animals. They're one of the greatest gifts, if not the greatest gift that we have on our planet.
Oh, absolutely.
No worries.
I don't think that I can remember a time when I did not have a pet. Just there's always been an animal in my life that has been a friend, or in some cases more than a friend. you talk about breath alchemy and speak highly of it and teach it. As a matter of fact, you want to go into a little bit about what it is and how it can help to benefit you?
Yeah, I've already described it with the absence of one element, and that's the breathing element, what I call circular breathing. And so, but the essence has already been described, and that is that we need to learn to shift out of resistance into acceptance of what is. In other words, we need to learn to embrace the harmonizing principle. And when we begin to do that, life begins to shift. And that is the essence of breath alchemy right there. I break it down further into what I call the five. What do I call it? The the 5 steps. No, come on, I forget it. It's just the harmonizing, the 5-step harmonizing process is what I call it. I've been going all over the place for almost 2 hours right now, so I get a little.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
Yeah, just got a little brain cramp there for a moment. But I better call it the 5-step harmonizing method because I'm the one who coined the term. And what it is it's putting it all together by suggesting that. And I can't, I can't give you circular breathing in the book, but I do the next best thing and go into great detail about, just how to harmonize instead of resist. And so it's basically combining a circular breathing rhythm with complete relaxation and opening up your inner feeling sense. Let's just forget about the breathing for a moment, because in order to really learn that requires one-on-one work, and which I'm willing to do for anybody who's welcome. And but I also want to help the greatest number of people that are listening in. You say you reach about 500,000 people. Well, I cannot work individually with 500,000 people. So to do the next best thing is that I want everybody to know that you can create literal miracles in your life if you learn to embrace the harmonizing principle. And that is, instead of resisting what you're feeling because it doesn't feel good, you learn to embrace it. Talk about your fears beginning to manifest, anxiety beginning to manifest, all of which is beginning to manifest in these accelerated times. That's the displacement process. All of that feels like something in the body. And it's an unpleasant feeling because we've been making it wrong, and we never stop to consider that. But stop to consider for a moment that if you can learn to shift your relationship from making it wrong to finding a way to let it be, and in so doing relax into the feeling by opening up your inner feeling sense to let yourself feel it and go into it and explore the subtle changes moment by moment, you can now begin to give yourself a thorough and accurate and honest and complete experience of just exactly what it does feel like, and that's what allows the energy to transmute. And even if you do not know circular breathing, you can create a great deal of transmutation of energy or integration simply by embracing the feeling and allowing yourself to feel it fully and thoroughly and accurately and honestly. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of that. It can begin to dramatically transform your life. And what it does is it takes you out of the living life conceptually, out of your reactive mind, and puts you into the heartfelt present moment, the heartfelt present moment that is your connection to Source, which is only available in the present moment and opens up your connection to Source, all that is, so that creativity and inspiration and joyfulness can begin to move through you. You don't think it, you live it, you experience it. And another way of saying it, Barbara, is we need to make the shift from living life conceptually to realizing that life is experiential. And for the most part, we don't make that distinction when we're living out of our reactive minds. But life is to be experienced. It is to be felt. And when you're feeling life, you're in the direct experience of it. And when you learn to discover your innate ability to transmute energy, now you can open up your inner feeling sense and be present, experientially speaking, in life. So it's a distinction between knowing something conceptually and knowing it as a living experience. That's the exciting adventure that Helen Keller was talking about.
Well,
yeah, I talk about that
also,
in great detail in the book.
Oh yeah. Well, it's sort of it's more than a knowingness; it's a beingness.
Yes.
And I think that's where so many people get caught because they aren't. It's sort of like you're a parrot or you're a prophet. If you're repeating chapter and verse from rote, then you know what you're repeating, but you don't understand it and you haven't lived it. And if you take that concept, integrate it into who and what you are, and then express it with your own added wisdom and philosophy, then you become the prophet, because you're taking something that's old and making it new. And that's what your whole process of the wave is, taking us from an old paradigm and allowing us to transmute, to transition, to ascend to a different paradigm that is more open.
Well, living out of the heartfelt presence of oneness, that's the shift right there. And I looked at some of the work of the Institute of Heart Math, and some of their work is really pretty good, because what they've discovered is that by far the most powerful electromagnetic field in the body is the heart. There's a whole lot more nerves going from the heart to the brain than coming the other way. They've also shown that it has its own innate intelligence, and it has its own nervous system. It has a sensory organ. It's capable of decoding and encoding information. And what it is, it's intuitive knowing. It's intuitive knowing. We feel intuition. We feel it through the heart and through the heart center. The brain, by contrast, thinks, yet the heart knows. And that knowing is innate intelligence. It's not memory or thinking. It's knowing. They go on to, they've established that the fact that the heart, catch this, it generates 60 times the electrical output of the brain, and then it connects to the heart chakra to the higher levels of awareness. And this is intuition. This is the heart. This is why intuition knows, because it connects you to source, connects you to all that is. And so that, in so many ways, is the shift that we have to make from the reactive mind, which does not know the present moment, to the present moment that is only experienced through our heartfelt connection to source. Yeah.
Yes.
Back in the day, in the mystery schools in ancient Egypt, this is the stuff that they were working with and they were practicing, and that they were spending 24 years in 2 12-year schools working through and getting people to make this shift so that they could be reconnected to wholeness. And when you're connected to wholeness, life really begins to show up. I just got to throw this out in the time we have remaining. I first heard about Akhenaten through his 12-year mystery school called The Law of One, which led me to the document called The Law of One. But in the mystery school, what I'm told is that the Egyptians were able to perceive and identify 8 completely different separate personalities, and that they together make up the entire personality complex of us as a spirit when we first came here. And as spirit, we go through each of these 8 personalities in our first 8 lifetimes. And then we continue to reincarnate, and we develop favorite ones. One's male and one is female, and they become dominant. But going back to Akhenaten's school, well, they took 12 years to pass through each of these 8 personalities. And at the end of this 12-year school, well, they'd have what you might call a conference with these 8 personalities, and in so doing, reestablish wholeness and wisdom. Because their final initiation was the great initiation into ascension, which happened in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid. Well, there's another interesting bit of information that I learned from a guy named Dr. Michael Newton, And he's got his analysis, and he's got his afterlife analysis book, and he's talking about how in any one lifetime, we're really only going to have about 15 to 20% of our soul's energy available to us, and the rest of it is in the higher realms. So we got 80% or more of that is in our soul, who's really what we are, yet we don't even know about it. Now you go back to the mystery schools in Egypt, and this is what they were doing. They were giving themselves just an unimaginable consciousness boost with this understanding so that they were able to remember that they were indeed that person who has had multiple incarnations, and that each identity, each incarnation is only a very small portion of their true nature. And in preparation for ascension of the King's Chamber, which was kind of useful, they were now becoming the living embodiment of being this disembodied consciousness that had been doing the work behind the scenes the whole time. So, if you can imagine that you are there's your higher self, you're the rest of the 80% of you behind the scenes that's directing the whole show, that in our reduced state of consciousness we're not even aware of, but in our expanded state of consciousness, as we go into fourth density, or if you were in the Egyptian mystery schools, as you were in the Ascension chamber, in the King's Chamber, you became the living embodiment of all of this. So that's some sense of what it might be like to make the shift into fourth density, where life, as the law of one again points out, is 100 times at least more harmonious than even your very best moments right here. And they go on to say that, the former life we had in this life, in this world, it just won't even come to mind, because now it's just indistinguishable from the greater whole. The greater whole of who we are is just so much more interesting and so much more fascinating that all the trials and tribulations that we went through here just dissolve into probable nothingness, because they're just, relatively speaking, totally insignificant. So that's a taste of what's coming. And I'm suggesting that this is something that we're all going to live through in our lifetimes. Well, not me suggesting it, but, references to it in at least 35 other cultures, and and being presented to us through ET contacts as early as the 1950s. So it's all there, and it's all available to us. And hopefully I'm doing everything in my power, and I know you are too, to get us on the optimal timeline so that we can all ascend as one, as though, we're all going to go through into the higher worlds, and life becomes a truly exciting adventure, living life happily ever after.
What?
Yeah,
Amen.
Go ahead.
What do you suppose happened the first time that nobody ascended? Where was humanity at that time?
Yeah, okay, that takes us back to the ancient builder race, and do we have time to get into that? I think we do. You got to go back 2.6 billion years. Now, to begin to unpack that, the ancient builder race was very, now they're six-dimensional beings. To say that they're benevolent beings is, an understatement. They began to colonize not only on planet Earth here. They originally went to Antarctica, which was not buried under 2 miles of ice at the time. They built an underground city, the ruins of which are still there today. They also built a great pyramid, which was at least double the size of the one at Giza. And so, but they didn't stop there. They went out to and colonized all throughout the local star cluster of 52 local stars in our local system, if you will. And they also, because they were benevolent, kept the peace for about 2 billion years. And they did it in a very ingenious way. I think we've all seen Star Wars. The three original ones, and so I think everybody is familiar with the what do they call them? The Empire, the dark side, and what did they call their hollowed out moon? The Death Star. Yeah, Darth Vader and the Death Star and all of that. Well, I think that George Lucas was definitely fed some inside information. He almost certainly was, because what it was doing was mimicking what the ancient builder race was doing. But the difference is that the ancient builder race was using it to keep the pace, to keep the peace throughout the local 52-star cluster, not to go out and conquer and control other planets like the Empire was doing in Star Wars. So just a slight difference there. And they were able to successfully keep the peace throughout local 52-star clusters for 2 billion years. That's pretty good. But something happened about 500,000 years ago, and one of the planets in our solar system, which was called Maldek, also known as Tiamat, well, interestingly enough, it's not there anymore. It's the asteroid belt between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. So what happened? Well, to cut to the quick, they became infused with negativity. And somehow they were able to hijack these literally hollowed out moons. And our moon is one of them, I would submit, where the ancient builder race discovered how to not only hollow them out, but use the technology in such a way to keep the peace, to create a defensive shield, if you will, that successfully kept the peace for a long, long time. But the people from Maldek, known as the progenitor race, became, as I said, infused with negativity, and they decided that, hey, it would be a good idea to hijack these things, and in so doing, use them to go out and conquer and control other worlds. Well, cut to the quick, they were not able to not only be successful, but they ended up destroying completely their planet. Like I said, it's become the asteroid belt between the orbit of Mars and Jupiter. So they did not survive, and the problem, if you will, is, and it did kind of become a problem here, because even though they were bad guys, so to speak, life is benevolent. And so even though their planet was destroyed, they had to be taken somewhere, most of them whom were taken here to planet Earth. And so you could say then that Earth became the home of a bunch of backstabbing individuals who were more interested in what's in it for me than what's in it for the greater good. And there's another way of looking at the shift that we have to make. And most of them were so infused in negativity that they didn't even incarnate as third-dimensional beings. They had to become Bigfoots for a number of lifetimes to work through enough karma. I mean, this is sounding so incredible, it couldn't possibly be true. Yet it is documented in the Law of One, and it's well known throughout the secret space program, and other people know about it too. William Tompkins talked about it, and many other people did. So I kind of think there is some basis in truth here. And so we became this planet that got held back to a very significant degree. And like we said, nobody has been ascending here. Because unlike most third-dimensional planets, we became sort of a dumping ground for beings who just weren't able to make it elsewhere and had to come somewhere to work through their karma. But hopefully we're learning from, and the infusion of higher dimensional energy is such that we are able to learn and grow from our past mistakes and use them as opportunities and to ascend ultimately into the higher dimensional reality. And I do make the case for it is quite likely that even though it is unlikely, as the Law of One says, that we will all ascend as one, it is definitely possible. And to deny the possibility is to deny the infinite possibilities of the moment. So they certainly include that as a possibility, and I think there's a very likely possibility that we are doing it as we should. And I do think, here again, to get to the bottom line, I think that even though we are currently going through this dark night of the soul, I do think that events will present themselves in such a way that there will be a great awakening. And the great awakening is that I think that we're looking at a transformation that is going to show up in ways that you can barely even imagine. You know, it's just like if you go to a caterpillar and say, hey, you want to learn how to fly? The caterpillar would say, you're nuts. We can't fly. But yet on the other side of the shift, the other side of the transformation, the butterfly, the monarchs, for example, are busy flying all over the planet. So we can't know the nature of the transformation on this side of it. Yet there is plenty of evidence to suggest that we are very deeply in that process. And when we do make that shift, in the interim, we're going to be living here still for a few years on third-dimensional Earth through what you and I would call nothing less than a golden age, where the veils will be lifted and where the free energy and the UFOs and all the rest of that will be presented to us, and we'll be able to live in a pollution-free environment, not with electrical vehicles and all that nonsense, but with when you've got pollution-free energy, you can do most anything you want, and it is pollution-free, in total harmony with the Earth. And I do believe that the darkness is being completely revealed, completely exposed, to be transmuted into the light. So in the interim, we're going to be living a golden age here, all in preparation for the planet ascending into fourth density. So fasten your seatbelts. Yeah, we're in a bit of a dark night of the soul right now, but I'm a total optimist. You may have noticed. I do really feel that everything is evolving as it should be. There's no accidents. Everything is evolving as it should be, and I think that this is the time and this is the place, and life is making the shift from black and white to becoming living color, from just nothing to an exciting adventure, as Helen Keller pointed out. So,
absolutely.
This is the place to be.
Yeah. I just noticed our time. If people want to get a hold of you, your website is Bob Frissell, FRISSELL.com. And
yes, it is.
The book is Catching the Ascension Wave. And I think it's everything you need to know about the coming Great Awakening. And it's an amazing book. You can't put it down, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And mostly good, but then you do have to do things like laundry and eating and working. But I found it a fascinating book, and it tied in with so much other material that is out there. It sort of connects a lot of stuff in a way that is very unique and very inspiring. And I think that it's definitely worth the read and looking into the breathing patterns that help. And I think that most people are going to find it so fascinating they want to go back and read your first book, for one thing, for sure. I know that was on my list for.
Yeah, you got to. The two books are tied together, and it's I came out with a new edition, the 25th anniversary edition of Nothing in This Book is True, but it's exactly how things are. Yeah, the two books are definitely tied together. The I Can't Put It Down thing, that's the kind of book that I love, and that's the way I write, with full intention. I want this to be so intriguing, so exciting, that people get stuck in the I can't put it down thing. And I've read many books that way, and I love it. It's like, wow, it's time to go to bed. But I can't put this thing down. I just got to keep going. Yeah, life is an exciting adventure when you're stuck in the I can't put it down mode. So that was my intention, and I do feel I succeeded.
Oh, you did succeed, absolutely. And I want to thank you so much. We are out of time, and I do. I'm going to have to read the other book, and we'll have to do a show on that one too. Oh yeah, I can hardly wait. I can hardly wait. So, so we'll do it again. Okay, well, thank you so very much. I so appreciate your taking the time. And I thank you for writing this book, which is really an amazing book.
Well, you're welcome. Absolutely. And thanks so much for having me. And
My
like I said
pleasure.
at the beginning, there's really, really nothing I enjoy more than, in this case, getting to spend 2 hours with you talking about, guess what? Stuff I'd be talking about it, I'd be researching it, I'd be digging deep into it, whether I was an author or not, whether it was my life's work or not. Just so happens I've got the best of both worlds. So thanks for the time together.
Do.
I truly, truly, truly enjoyed it.
'Twas my pleasure, and we will do this again. And everybody, thank you for joining us. I know we're short on time here, but Mark has a show Tuesday and Wednesday, so do check on the calendar and see what he has in store for you, because, as always, it's going to be fascinating. Take care now.